Hello, everybody. Welcome to the live stream on Matt Walsh's documentary, What is a Woman? I have to admit, I laughed watching this a lot more than I expected. A few of my friends had seen it, said that they liked it in general. I had not gotten on the hype train when it was very popular some months ago, but I thought it was finally time to give it a watch because I think he has another documentary out already, which I should probably take a look at as well about racism. But I was struck by the amount of delusion in the interviews from people who these are people allegedly with degrees, right? These are the people with letters after their names, the educated part of our society. Uh, and yet they're able to live in this delusion and they're unable to answer what a woman is. And in the very end credits, we have that very famous scene of then nominee, now Supreme Court Justice Katanji, I don't remember her last name, being asked what a woman was, and she says, "Well, I'm not a biologist. I mean, what would I know what a woman is?" And the the state of the situation in the West, and obviously Walsh goes to Africa and he sees the Maasai, and he presents all of this to the Maasai, and wow, the 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 dress. I don't know if that was their formal dress because there was a visitor coming, but the clothing on the Maasai women so beautiful, the jewelry and the colors that they were wearing. But one of the agendas that I realized in watching this documentary that I was quite unaware of is how embedded big pharma is in this. And that should surprise precisely nobody that big pharma is interested in this crime against our children and our society in encouraging gender transitions. The number was put in the documentary at 1.3 million per child. That is what that child is worth in terms of drugs, medical procedures, ongoing hormonal therapy for however long that is. And we can see obviously who benefits, not the children, but these big pharmaceutical companies. And obviously people who are pushing a leftist agenda. The other thing that was implied by some of the sane people that were interviewed is there is no long-term research done on the reaction of hormones. What happens to these people who go through transitions? And at least one of the interviewees said this generation is the guinea pig generation. We're going to see what happens to these people. One of the most surprising guests, the one that I probably appreciated the most in the documentary, was a, I think, biological female who was transitioned. And in the trailer, but not in the film. So in the trailer for this, he says, I was in my 40s and I was fooled. What chance do children have? And he's really in pain about the choices that he made. And here I'm a bit confused. Obviously, he appears to be a man from the way he addresses, but he transitioned from being a biological female. And you have some other talking points around, using particular pronouns. And at one point, Walsh talks to someone who considers him or herself like a wolf person. and and Walsh says, "Could you demonstrate some of those wolf behaviors?" "No, I don't feel comfortable with that." And the number of times that the interviews were asked to be ended. "I think we're going to end this interview." And the idea that I'm only going to discuss my ideas if I'm facing a friendly audience, I think was particularly seen in the Dr. Phil episode that was featured at the end of this documentary, but apparently was pulled off of the air and it's not available on YouTube. I didn't really go search for it. In which you have three panelists who are all on board with the trans agenda, and you could say a mostly sympathetic audience, it sounded like, versus Matt Walsh by himself. And they said, "Well, why do you care? Why do you care?" And that's always this sort of self-defensive uh, attack point. Well, why do you care what happens? And yes, well, as Walsh correctly points out, I care about truth and something as basic as what is a woman, which I thought was so funnily answered at the end of the documentary, where the wife says, it's a biological female who needs help opening this jar of pickles. And underlying all of this, I think Walsh doesn't get into it explicitly. I don't know why, but he should, is looking at the idea of medical practice, pharmaceutical practice outside of God, outside of the realm of ethics, outside of objective truth. And what it does, and you can see, is this constitutive pride in which we know everything. We know that this is fine, this is totally reversible, there won't be any problems when you try to transition a male into a female, and they can come back. And that, I think one particular case that was mentioned was a 14-year-old was put on puberty blockers and developed osteoporosis within 2 years. And one of the early interviews was, where am I in my gender journey? Just this idea that this is something that develops over time, like my entrepreneurial journey or my parenting journey, my gender journey. Just very, very strange overall. Two key figures that I thought were important to look at. Alfred Kinsey is called out, so is John Money, as real perverts and people who are still held up in the academy these days as reliable people, but who really were just pedophiles or complete sexual perverts who then falsified their research and are still, as I said, held in some esteem in the academy. It's just crazy. But that's where we are. And the idea that he would go to a women's march, ask what is a woman, and then be called a hater or a jerk for asking this question just shows you, I think, the state of where we are. If you really believe in your ideas, so let's grant for a minute that this is even up for debate. If you really do believe in your ideas, you should be able to defend your ideas even in hostile environments. It's not hard to defend your ideas when you're surrounded by affirming people, which there's also, that's something else that's noted, the idea of affirmation therapy, that I would pay somebody to affirm my beliefs, whether they're true or not. And so Jordan Peterson is one of the interview subjects and says, that doesn't make any sense, affirming therapy. And I hadn't really heard of affirming therapy, but that's the point that's mentioned. But if we're in a state of our society today in which men and the idea of men and women are fluid, and there's no basis for that, we're chipping away at fundamentals of existence, which allow us to live in society together. If we as society can't agree that 2 + 2 = 4, or that you stop at a red light or you go at a green light, society will break down. And there are forces, the trans agenda, the homosexual agenda, all of these things are not accidental. They didn't come out of the air. Kinsey and Money, while they were noted as people who were responsible in some part in the United States, they're not the only ones. And something that we'll talk about in the next stream over at Palestine Bookshelf is the idea of the Talmud putting forth 8 different genders. So there's a convergence of the trans agenda and the breakdown of Western society with the organized forces of naturalism, of which Talmudic Judaism is an aspect of that. Now, this is a Daily Wire documentary. Daily Wire is, I think, owned in part by Ben Shapiro. So no such thing should be meant. No such thing can or will be mentioned in the documentary, but you have to dig deeper. And I think that's probably my biggest fault in this documentary is, can you scratch a little bit further instead of making Kinsey and John Money and some government officials and some doctors and some pharmacists the chief culprits? Can you scratch a little bit more? Can you dig a little deeper and say, where is this coming from? And what is the ultimate purpose? Who is served by the breakdown of our society? There are people who are invested in that. And I think one very good target that was hit well in the documentary is Big Pharma. but feels faceless. There's more at stake, and you need governmental cooperation, not just one or two crazy congressmen. You need entire parties. You need presidents. You need Supreme Court judges, et cetera. And we've seen some of that, as I said, ending with the questioning of Ketanji Jackson. Is that her name? About what is a woman. This is a Supreme Court justice of the United States can't define what a woman is. And she's going to rule on court cases for the entire country. So overall, I think it's worth watching. It's not very long. I want to say it's something like 90 minutes, but overall worth watching. If only to wake you up. I think it woke me up a little bit more to some of the realities. I think I thought of it more as background noise when I have heard about it, but watching it all pulled together into a documentary with a narrative and a start and an end, I think was very good. So for someone who, like me, does not know a whole lot about the arguments for gender transition and what the talking points are for the other side, I think it's a good introduction, but he needs to go deeper, and I can only hope that he does. I don't think you can on the Daily Wire, but I would say let's give the Daily Wire at least a credit for making some kind of start in the right direction. In the chat, wish more people were open to the truth just as they are ready to embrace the lies. Yeah, Tony, I don't know. What is it that keeps people from being open to the truth? I think that's a mystery in and of itself. No, I think people would like to think that they're open to the truth, but so often what we really want, and I'm speaking of everybody here, is to affirm the life we're already living. Do we want to be told that we're sinners? Do we want to be told that we need to love our enemies? Do we need to do we want to be told that we have to give up the things that we cherish the most in order to live the life that we're called to? And this obviously today is the feast of the conversion of St. Paul. For those of you who are not Christians, St. Paul was converted, the very famous, and this has entered the Western idiom, a road to Damascus moment, in which Paul is going, he's knocked off of his horse. This is captured in a very famous Rembrandt painting, in which St. Paul is on the ground and he's reaching up, and there's this sfumato technique that is so known in Rembrandt, and you see this darkness and this light. But yeah, Paul abandoning what he dedicated his whole life to, which was this pursuit of the Christians, and becoming a Christian himself. So we have to be willing to leave the things behind that were true to us in some points of our life when we see a greater truth, embrace that. So if we see, for example, I wanted to protect the children from these molesters because I wanted to do it for my own personal reasons, but there's larger agendas at work, and I think we have to be willing to embrace that and to not be caught in our own ideas. And I think Nadira is pointing to this, perhaps personal dogmas, right? What are the restraining beliefs, the things that are holding you back from embracing the truth? And sometimes it may be that you just think something is too ridiculous, and sometimes maybe things are. But I really think, if nothing else, the last 5 years, particularly post-COVID, has opened up a lot of people to the possibility of things not being what they're proposed to be, and that there's really probably something else behind it. At least one thing, maybe 4 or 5 or 6 other things. So I've said everything I wanted to say. I wanted to open up comment section. Did any of you have a chance to watch this documentary, or had you seen it, many months before? What did you think of it? Did you like it? Have you seen other helpful documentaries on the trans agenda, the trans issues? Let me know in the chat. We can talk about it, and if there's not too much conversation there, we can wrap up our discussion today. And as I said, I'll be over on Palestine Bookshelf in about 15 minutes talking about the film Occupied, which has a couple eyebrow-raising moments in it There'd be plenty to talk about there. But for right now, I want to talk about Matt Walsh's "What Is a Woman" documentary. Any thoughts? Any questions? Any comments? All right. Well, thanks for stopping by. If you're watching this later on replay, please feel free to keep the conversation going in the comments and share any recommendations or any thoughts, other films that we might consider watching. And as I said before, if you'd like to join me on Palestine Bookshelf in about 15 minutes, I'll be talking about the documentary Occupied, which is about um, it's about lots of different things, but at a minimum, continued discussion about um, the Israeli influence in the United States and what the implications are um, for the Palestine issue, for 9/11, and other things. All right, thank you all for coming, and I'll see you over there if you'd like to join us.